All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our latest installment of the Sutron educational webinar series that we've been putting on for the last few months. This week, we're doing the information overload. The choice is yours. With us today, we have Michael Hughes, who's coming to us from our London, UK office, myself, Tanya Anderson, and I'm coming from Vancouver, BC, and of course, our special guest speaker, who's coming from Toronto, Canada. Michael, could you tell us a little bit about Sutron?
Happy to. Thank you, Tanya. So just a very brief setting of the scene for those of you that may be new to the sessions. We do have a lot of returning delegates and attendees. We're glad to see them back. And we also extend a very warm welcome to anybody that's joining us for the first time today. Sutron Global is a cloud-based library, knowledge and information management solution provider dedicated to managing library transformation and helping information professionals manage the interesting and diverse collections that they typically have under their custody in their different institutions. How we do that is evidenced on the next slide, where you can see examples of just some of the solutions that we make available to help people do what it is that they do, and how we engage with them and assist them on a day-to-day. So core to our offering is our library and information management system, but increasingly, of course, more so lately, we've seen a rapid acceleration of requirement to manage and serve up digital content to people in distributed work environments. So we have workflow for that, as well as workflow for managing older material, more rarefied items in the form of archive, in addition to our Sutron Discovery platform, which is a one-stop search platform. So this, as I say, we're very excited to be bringing you this webinar today, and as Tanya's mentioned, it is the latest in the series. So on the next slide, you'll see a little bit more about what is also available as part of that series and initiative. We are giving back to the information management community during the pandemic as best we can. So provision of these educational webinars is just one form of the program that we put together. Another form is through financial assistance to any interested parties that are willing to onboard with our software and take advantage of it. So if anybody would like to receive any more detail around the nitty-gritty and the fuller detail around that, then please reach out to us. As you can see on screen there is an email address in addition to the next slide. Some of our other channels and outlets where you are able to connect with us and find more information. But having set the scene, let me throw it back over to Tanya, who will introduce our guest speaker for this exciting session. Thank you, Tanya.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael. So without further ado, let me introduce Joan, who will be speaking to us today. And Joan, I'm going to give you keyboard control. So please, if you wouldn't mind, it is all yours now.
Okay. I just have to, oh, there we go. Good day, everyone. Tony, Tanya, and Michael, thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure working with the team at Sutron. I just wanted to fulfill my legal obligation and let you know that I have used a PowerPoint slideshow template from Slides Carnival. Check them out. They are great when you are not a PowerPoint expert. Also, all pictures, except for one, used in this presentation were taken by me, so no copyright was infringed. And you'll notice that you have been provided with a handout. And if you notice that some of the slides are, or some of the images are bigger than others, that's not sloppiness on our part. I just wanted to make sure that you could actually see what was on those slides. So I made sure that they were a little bit bigger because I sometimes have a hard time seeing things. So anyway, now that I've covered the important stuff, we'll move on to the presentation. While I was trying to figure out my topic for today, I was talking to a friend who told me that he had struggled with information overload at work. And I find that these days, especially, information is little like the leaves in the fall. It never seems to stop coming at us. Now, what you choose to do with all the information is up to you. So back to the conversation with my friend Mark. We were in probably the 4th month of the COVID pandemic, and I was really starting to feel overloaded. As the executive director of a smaller association, I wear many hats, as I did on this rainy day on the Camino. Everyone was reminding me of the things that I should be aware of. As a leader, how was my team doing? How were they coping? In Canada, there was government funding. Were we eligible? How the heck did we apply? Human resources issues, operational issues, back to work issues. Everyone wanted to help me, and if I had chosen to, I could have spent hours upon hours watching webinars, reading articles, being informed, kept up to date, and made knowledgeable. But I had a job to do, so I had to make some choices. Now, the concept of informational overload has been around for a long time. It was coined by Bertram Gross back in 1964, but it was the Tofflers who brought the concept into the mainstream with their book, Future Shock, which was published in 1970. Now, I was a child in 1970 and have been working since the mid-80s. I have never before felt the deluge of information that I feel now. So if in 1970, they already recognized that decision processes could affect our brain if we were overloaded, what does that say about us 50 years later? We're going to fast forward to the 1990s, where Sheena Iyengar was studying choice. Now, she has since then become a world-known expert. And according to her, the average knowledge worker must process, consciously or unconsciously, the equivalent of 174 newspapers of information in one day. Now, she obviously is the expert. She's the person we need to hear from. She recognizes the issue of overload, and she has some really good advice on how to cope. Also, she's really interesting and fun speaker, and I would recommend you watch her TED Talks. Now, she started her work, or I guess became famous, when she and a gentleman named Mark Leeper published a fascinating study in 2000. And it started really simply with some gourmet jams. They set up a display in a grocery store of 24 jams, and anybody who was willing to sample got a $1 off coupon. And on another day, shoppers were presented with only 6 gourmet jams, but they also got a coupon if they sampled. When it came time to make a purchase, they discovered that the people who saw the large display were 1/10 as likely to buy as those people who sampled at the small display. Now, one day I went online to order some masks for my family, and I didn't buy anything. There were way too many choices. And I am calling the story of my mask choices, comparing it to their jam choices. So what was I feeling when I wasn't able to make a decision on buying a mask? Well, this term apparently is called choice paralysis. And other studies have confirmed the same with food products. That's low level, not expensive products, consumer goods, retirement investment options. So people who have been presented with too many options when trying to figure out what to do with large sums of money have become overwhelmed. And even people who have had too many job choices or job options, they too have experienced this paralysis. Now, this tells us something about human psychology. First of all, choice paralysis is not uncommon. But I'm not saying the choice is not good. I think we just have to understand that its relationship to satisfaction is more complicated than we had assumed. Too much choice will actually cause us to suffer anxiety, tension, and stress. Our productivity and motivation will be affected negatively. We become easily distracted and make mistakes and accomplish less. And sometimes we set excessively high expectations and blame ourselves if our choices don't work. Obviously, our brain has its limits, as it does with these two ladies who were at a conference and probably went to one too many workshops during the day. They seem to have lost it at the West party that night. Now, Professor Iyengar has 5 recommendations that are specific to information gathering, but we can transfer these to our everyday work lives. So her first suggestion is be selective. Is it worth my time? Now, you probably have a sense of what is valuable and what doesn't really work for you and how you should be spending your time. You may not be following what you already know, but you may be getting a lot of things in your box and feeling you have to read everything. But if you take a moment, you'll probably go, there's some stuff that's coming in that I should probably unsubscribe from. In my case, I get 2 very interesting emails daily, one from Fast Company and one from AALL. They provide a quick abstract of articles, and from there I can pick what I read. A couple of years ago, I got free tickets to a hockey game, and it was worth my time to go to that one game. They were great seats. It was a fun experience. But if someone offered me season's tickets, I think I'd say no, because it wouldn't be a productive way of spending my time. Now, do you need to know everything? Do you need to be informed about all aspects of your work? Let me tell you a bit about what I do. So I'm the executive director of a small not-for-profit that also operates the courthouse library, and I have a variety of responsibilities. Technology plays a big part of what we do. We have an AMS, that's an association management software package, and it's essentially the backbone of what we do. Our website sits on it, our membership database resides there, we send our emails to our members from there, we take event registration. Obviously, this is really important. But when I see articles about AMSs, I don't read them. I don't follow what's going on in that area because we changed our AMS in 2019. I'm not going to be changing or looking at options for a few years. And we know how quickly technology changes. So in a few years, when we think maybe it's time to make a change, I'll look at what's on the market. But for now, I have other things to focus on. Like all other not-for-profits, our finances have taken a bit of a hit in this pandemic. Our membership is a little bit down, and obviously that means that revenue is down. Also, we decided to give our members a cut on registration for education programs, and that also has affected our budget. So do I closely look at our membership numbers and our revenue? Absolutely. Am I always listening to what's going on out there in the way of alternative revenue sources? How could I be making a little bit of extra money? Absolutely. So are our finances top priority for me? You better believe it. Along with that, membership numbers. How many members are we retaining and are we recruiting new members is also very important. How do we keep our members happy? What do we do to attract new members? Both are always a concern, and now they are especially top of mind. So I'm starting to make some decisions about how I spend my time. When my friend and I walked the Portuguese Camino, we had a guidebook. We thought that's what we needed. We discovered that once we ended up in the town where the hostel we wanted to sleep at was closed, but we found someone to help us out, a very friendly cabbie. Now, understanding the importance of the decision that you are making is really significant. We're making decisions every day, all day, from what you eat for breakfast to what you wear when you get dressed, to where you sit on the commuter train or the subway or however you get to work. Now, those decisions obviously don't require the same amount of effort as when we were picking our new association management software. That was a really big decision. and we took the requisite amount of time for it. It couldn't be an uninformed decision. But some decisions can be what you call good enough decisions. They don't require the same effort as picking an AMS. We used to have a lot of social in-person events, and I'd have to consider what we would be serving. And as long as I knew that meat eaters, vegetarians, and vegans were covered, and the dessert wasn't going to cause an allergic reaction, we were good. I didn't have to spend hours and hours pondering the menus. So by identifying which choices are worth extensive time and research and which aren't, you too can free yourself up to make effective decisions when it counts. People who visit Peggy's Cove have a very simple decision to make, and the sign reminds them that if they don't stay off the black rocks, they will drown. Now, I'm sure we've all experienced this. You've sat down to look at an article or check out a website, and you've followed the links. You've lost yourself in the learning and the reading, and then discovered you spent a few hours of precious time without even noticing. Now I'm going to say something, and you'll say, how do I do this? But don't do it. It's very addictive when you do that. So you have to set a time limit. You have to start using a little bit of discipline and put some control in your day. Now, later on, we'll talk about the practical side of scheduling your day, and that will help you with this. What I'm suggesting is you use your time strategically. Here, our friend Erica was reading about the next day on the Camino Frances. She was just reading enough to be prepared, but not enough to overwhelm herself. Now, the last suggestion from Professor Iyengar is schedule related tasks together. Apparently, our brain functions better if we do like tasks next to each other in 30-minute intervals. That means that you won't get bogged down in a mental rut, and you won't be experiencing information overload. I tried something similar when I went to DC after the AALL conference in Baltimore. I tried to cram as much into my days there because DC has a lot to see. Well, when I was at one end of the mall, I visited Congress. As a law librarian, I also had to walk by the Supreme Court. And of course, the highlight of that day was visiting the Library of Congress. So I scheduled my like tasks together. So here's a recap. You've got this on your slide. But what I want to say is you can start implementing these things right away. They'll give you some peace of mind and perhaps start freeing up some of your time. And if you haven't already guessed, I like to walk a lot. And even in my suburban neighborhood, I see some pretty cool stuff when I'm walking. Now, since we're talking about the brain, we also have to talk about multitasking. And I'm sure the multitaskers in the audience are saying, what a great feeling of getting 3 things done at the same time. Boy, am I ever productive. I'm getting so much done. These people in Barcelona are so happy they're dancing in the street, but not so fast. Remember I mentioned Fast Company and the daily abstracts I get? Well, one day, the summary brought my attention to an article entitled, Believing These 3 Myths About Multitasking May Be Ruining Your Productivity. Well, I had to read that because I was just preparing for this presentation. And the debunking of these myths is very informative. Often people feel a sense of accomplishment, so they think they must be getting lots done. But actually, all you're probably getting done is small-scale tasks, and even then, not doing them well. In actual fact, with the way our brains work, you're probably spending more time on getting things done. Myth 2, you save energy by switching between tasks. Well, actually, when you switch between taxing jobs, you are actually draining your reserves. So your brain working hard is physically affecting you. the switch between tasks leaves something called attention residue. So in actual fact, your brain is still working on the last task. It hasn't switched over to the next one. So you're not working at your optimum. And people think that as they multitask, they get better at it. And that's actually not true. Sure, sometimes you can do rote tasks, intellectually simple tasks, where you may juggle. But even then, you're probably not at your most productive. And when it comes to more complex tasks, you absolutely need to focus. If you believe these myths, let me tell you about the magic rooster of Barcelos. Now, there's been extensive research done at Stanford University about people who multitask, and they've discovered that that people multitask, the more they are training their brains to be scattered, and they are less capable of creative thought. In some cases, your IQ can even drop by multiple points, so that your brain becomes as well performing as an 8-year-old, or as well performing as these partying adults. So when I'm walking the Camino, I rely on the maps that I see. I put my trust in them. But I know that people are skeptical when it comes to how the brain works. And people who have felt successful multitasking are probably saying, yeah, that's everybody else, that's not me. So I just say, go on Google, type in multitasking tests, free, and try one of them. You will be amazed what you learn about your brain when you try that. So now we've been talking a lot about brain science and theories, but we need to get into the practical applications of how to help ourselves. As a walker, I couldn't do it without a good pair of hiking boots. Now the question is, what do you need to cope with information overload? In the next few minutes, I'll share with you a little bit of what I've read in the literature and what the experts suggest, and throw in a few personal experiences. People rely on productivity systems now, and basically this slide says you got to figure out what works for you. It's an interesting article. It's in your handout, so you can follow the link and read about it. I recognize that we're all unique. Now, even though we're all unique, there are some things that seem to be true over years, and everyone experiences them. So years ago, I learned about David Allen, and this is the cover of my very well-worn copy of his book. His system has actually now been trademarked as the GTD method, and I'm not getting any kickbacks for mentioning it. You'll find that if you do a search on productivity systems, his comes up on all the lists, often number one, but definitely on all the major lists. So it's worth mentioning. And also, I would suggest, if this is an area that you're really wanting to develop for yourself, get the new edition of his book. It was, I think, published in 2015. It's a very worthwhile read. Now, okay, let's try again. Okay. In my mind, much of the advice that I hear, and even some of the stuff that we've already talked about, boils down to the simple concept of managing your distractions. And David Allen talks extensively about that. And he gets into brain science in a different way. He says it's hard to be creative and to think about big issues or hard problems that you're trying to solve when your mind is occupied. And your mind can be occupied with things like keeping your grocery list. Oh, on the way home, I have to remember to buy milk, bread, and what's the third thing? Or tomorrow, I got to remember to do this first thing in the morning when I get to work. It's a small task, but I have to remember to do it. His suggestion is clear your mind. Get everything down into your system, whatever system you choose, and your brain will operate better. Now, I wonder how many of you sometimes can't fall asleep because your brain's working, or you wake up in the middle of the night and can't get back to sleep, or in any other way have disturbed sleep. I have to say, my hand goes up for that, because I sometimes don't follow my own systems. And when my brain is working, I can't rest or relax properly. Some of the best sleeps I have had were when I was walking the Camino in Spain, when I was far from work and its worries. They were not on my mind. So even in a hostel, in a room that looks like this, I could sleep. The second part of that is I was also getting exercise. And whenever I do a presentation, I like to talk about how important it is to take care of our physical health, because that affects our mental health. Now, when you do start looking at productivity systems, it can mean different things to different people. Some of you may be looking for a task management system, something where you can keep lists, essentially. If you're looking for a digital one, maybe the one called Todoist, which seems popular, will be your choice. Or maybe you'll just use a paper notebook. Just because something is complicated doesn't make it better. So just being able to write things down might work for you. Perhaps you do a lot of project work, and you're working either individually or with a group, in which case maybe you'll want to use a Kanban board system to manage your projects. We have Trello where I work, and it's a handy little tool. Now, when you think about all of the tools that do come up when talking about task management, there's one thing that I've noticed is a trend. They all talk about breaking your work down into manageable pieces. And that's if you're using them properly. So saying this big project goes onto my list of what I'm going to work on tomorrow isn't going to work. But if you break that project into manageable steps, then it will work better for you. So that's sort of like these maps that we used to encounter when we were walking. They broke up the next couple of days walking. So the other thing you have to do is you need to prioritize your work. So I'm sure we've all seen those quadrant type things that talk about high priority and low priority, but I'm going to give you a different spin on it. When you're prioritizing your work, think about it this way. Things you want to do, but things you don't want to do, but need to do. And then, of course, the things you like to do or want to do and need to do. And then the other two that aren't as important. And you've probably heard this advice before, but I think it's worth repeating. You need to focus on the things you don't want to do, but need to do. You need to tackle the biggest, the ugliest, the most distasteful things and get them done. Not procrastinate or let them lag on and interrupt your sleep and bother you. They need to be tackled. And this advice comes from a book called Eating That Frog, written by Brian Tracy. So we've talked about prioritizing our work, tracking our work, prioritizing it. And now we need to think about scheduling. The suggestions that everybody gives are mark time in your calendar to get your work done. Don't answer emails, Twitter, or allow your focus to be taken over by something by something else. So as Sheena Iyengar would tell us, focus and don't multitask. The other thing to consider when you're thinking about how to schedule your day is, when are you most productive? For me, it's the morning, and apparently that's pretty common. So here's a snapshot of a week for me. I've made a few decisions about how I will get my work done. On my way in, I quickly check my email and calendar so I know what's waiting for me. And then on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, I have time to work on projects. That's when I eat my frog. So you can see it in purple on my calendar. The beginning of the week, you'll see on Monday is the day when I meet with my team. And for those of you who say, oh, your team interrupts you a lot, have you actually scheduled time to meet with them? If people know they've got half an hour of your time every week or every second week, and things aren't always urgent, then you can cover that stuff in a meeting and you won't have those constant interruptions. And in the afternoon, I try to get my meetings in then with, other people not in my organization, take calls, answer email. And Friday is a bit of a wrap-up day for me in the afternoon. The one thing I haven't worked into my plan yet is when to give myself that 20% of creative time that the people who work at Google have, the time when they, I don't know, bounce balls, play games, whatever they do to make their brain work. So what I heard someone say on the radio the other day really resonated with me. I can't remember who said it though. He said, discipline gives you freedom. So none of this is easy. You have to put some time and effort in, and there will be a payoff. This is the garden in front of my house in April. As you can see, I was working on it. And this is the garden in July. The work paid off. Also, the discipline of not going to the garden store and buying even more plants. It's always tempting to plant more in a garden than there's space for. So every day we have access to more information than our brains can effectively process. The choice is ours if we want to be overwhelmed by it or take control, use discipline, employ some productivity methods, and manage the information, not let it manage us. And even with tools and signs, sometimes things go a little bit awry, but we can work it out. So now I'm wondering if there are any questions.
Yes, thank you, Joan. There are a couple. Before I come to those, let me just point out that if anybody would like to ask during a question, you should have a questions function normally to the right side of your screen on the GoToWebinar window there. So if you do have one, then please now's the time. So Joan, harking back to the calendar and the organising of the week, someone is asking what success you have found or your views on Pomodoro or things like time boxing, so that you kind of set yourself a limit on time for those tasks.
I had tried to use Pomodoro, but I work in a space where I don't have any walls, so too many alarms aren't good. But it's a good technique. Even when you saw on my calendar those purple slots of 2 hours, I like to get up and move around on a regular basis. It's good for you. But if you give yourself 20 minutes of no interruptions or whatever some of the other tools provide, you will be effective. I have discovered I can really accomplish a lot in those chunks of time when I know that I'm not looking at my email and no one's walking into my office.
Sure.
I believe strongly that actually does work, and maybe this is just me being my age, but I find, and maybe this has happened to others, you flip to your email to look for something, you're going to respond to somebody, it's on your list, and then you see another email and you say, oh, I've got to respond to that person, and then you go, oh, what was I doing in the first place when I was looking at my email? The brain really does have a hard time keeping up with us when we're flipping back and forth. So dedicated time, I believe very strongly in it.
Sure. Yes, the rabbit hole effect. Just on the email as well, there's another question here about, you mentioned not checking email perhaps until the afternoon. So how do you set expectations for other people who may expect you to be doing that in the morning if they're kind of waiting on an answer for something, I guess?
I try to convey to everybody I work with what I'm doing. and I also am at the end of a phone. So I think we get inundated with email, and if you're trying to watch that all the time, it becomes a problem. I don't know about you guys, but I get far less phone calls. So if someone needs me urgently, they will pick up the phone. Or the other thing is, when we're back at work now, but when we were working from home, the people I worked with, I'd say, just send me a text, because a lot of people don't text me. I don't use my text a lot. So if I get pinged on text, I know, oh, that's probably pretty important. So there are alternative ways people can contact me if it's urgent.
Sure, that makes sense. Someone's asking a good one here. Would you recommend or any examples of when it would be appropriate and beneficial to multitask?
Okay, so you know what I did today? I'm working from home, and I had some letters I had to sign. We do packages for new members, and I like to sign the letters. And I was watching a webinar, and I was scribbling my name on the bottom of the letters. But I know my name pretty well, and I've written that signature many, many times. So I wasn't doing two things that were terribly taxing. I was doing one really easy thing, and I was able to continue focusing on the webinar and put my pen down when I wanted to jot down something. But if I was trying to write a letter and watch that webinar, well, I don't think I would have done either of them very well. So I think, you know, the multitasking, if you are going to try it, it has to be with something really easy, really simple. And for me, reading emails and reading stuff, if I'm going to truly understand it, I need to focus on it. I'd hate to, you know, be reading emails and doing something else and think I understood an email and respond incorrectly. So I would prefer to just focus on that one thing and make sure I've understood it, and then move on to the next thing. But yeah, so multitasking, yeah, I know. We all still do it, but let's think about what we're doing when we do it.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. What if you work alone and can't delegate? What strategy is there for blocking out that time? If any thoughts on that?
Oh goodness. But if you're working alone, then who is interrupting you? I'm just trying to, so is it the email, or is it just because you're working alone, you have to be available for, or who do you have to be available for? I guess it depends on what the job is. I mean, if you're a reference librarian,
right, exactly, yeah.
You then probably have to, you are going to have to multitask. And that's going to be hard. Because I know, like my team at work, we have 3 people who do reference, and they have a few other jobs, but we try to hive off the time. Like one of them takes care of all the invoices. So it's like, well, you know, the hour that you're taking care of the invoices, you're not doing reference, because you don't want to code an invoice incorrectly or make a mistake. So that's a hard one. I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, I think there's a concept from someone else. I seem to recall the concept of golden hours, where you can kind of carry out certain tasks only within a certain time frame. So if there is a thing like invoicing, perhaps it could be done first thing or last thing, and then when the emails are coming through in office hours, it all goes to which environment you work in, I think. But yeah, those are good suggestions.
And what you communicate, right? Like you set up expectations. When we first went back to work, because we were just not sure how busy our library would be and what getting to work would be, we adjusted our hours, and we let people know that we were working a shorter day, so that people wouldn't be emailing us first thing in the morning and going, why haven't you sent me what I needed? So I think that's a conversation around communication.
Right, setting expectations. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We've got one last one I think we'll put to you, if we may. It says, do you have any suggestions for battling screen fatigue?
Oh, God. No, no. I don't. I do get up and move around. I do try to get a walk in. But I think if anyone, and I haven't seen any good advice about that either. You know, nothing's come up in my Fast Company feed yet. But if anybody does have anything,
Please share.
even, yeah, I'd love to know
Absolutely.
that.
No problem. Thank you. So thanks ever so much for taking those questions. I hope that was useful for the audience. We certainly appreciate that. And we've got some good positive feedback coming in through the chat messages already, which is nice to see. Let me just throw this back over to Tanya just to close out the session. But thank you so much, Joan.
You're welcome.
All right, and thank you. Apparently, I'm going to have to work on my multitasking. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to keep up with the latest events, we do have another webinar scheduled already for October 20th. So if you want to stay abreast of that, follow us Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. You can find out information all there. And of course, on our website. So thank you again for attending. If you need anything, the information, you'll be getting a recording, and we'll be also sending out a copy of the PowerPoint as well as the handout in case you didn't get a chance to grab it before you go. All right, thank you again, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.